Hey everyone, Nathan here, president of Saybrook University. Welcome to another episode of Saybrook Insights. In 2016, I had the privilege of attending our education system's international program called Education Beyond Borders, in which we centered ourselves in Berlin, Germany, over about a period of 9 days. And during this experience, students and faculty from all of our schools participated in several really intensive educational and applied experiences. The one that stood out to me was led by our collaborative faculty team, both from Saybrook University and the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, in a community-based action research project called Photo Voice. The individuals who were central to this experience included several Syrian refugees, all of them living within a large temporary space of hundreds of other refugees, designed to house them while they found work, living options, and schooling. The project itself, Photo Voice, was designed to bring these refugees and our group together to gain understanding of their experiences, whether it was their journey out of Syria to Europe, their current experiences in Berlin, insights into their families, their living conditions, and more. The project captured really so many beautiful, poignant stories, in photos, of course, of their lives, offering us a window into their existence. You know, I was particularly struck by one young man's photos and his associated story. We had time to also talk extensively. He had only recently found his way to Berlin, literally traveling thousands of miles. I kid you not, thousands of miles to escape the violence that had fallen on his city and had impacted his family. He told us how his family scraped together all they had in terms of money to get his sister and him out of the country. Their only way initially was on a smuggler's truck that would leave in the middle of the night and with very little opportunity for more than a goodbye. Those parents sacrificed themselves ultimately so that their children could live. His and his sister's journey would not be simple nor brief. He estimated that the circuitous journey by car, on foot, by boat, and swimming in the open sea ranged in the thousands of miles. I don't want to get it totally wrong, but I think he even said up to 12,000 miles in total. And sadly, his sister and he were ultimately separated. At our discussion, he was still unsure as to where she was. Take that in for a minute. You've made it all this way, all these miles. Your parents had sacrificed so much. And the sibling that you were with was separated from you, possibly permanently. His story, like so many, emphasized the importance of understanding each other more deeply, to reach across these manufactured boundaries and cultural divides, really to better grasp what is going on in each other's lives. In doing so, we're able to step outside of ourselves, expanding that capacity for greater compassion, love, and understanding. And during that time, during those moments in our conversations with him and experiencing the others that were involved, I was really transformed. The depth of his story and the stories told by his compatriots, both through photos and narrative, offered us real insights and an important outlet for them to express themselves, to talk through and to show really in real form both the joys and the traumas they experience, and really the indomitability of the human spirit. And the combination of international connections and psychology are pretty powerful indeed. When we think about how we evolve, it's not just what we do here in the States, right? I think we get in this, it's all about the United States and us in California or in Ohio or in Florida. It's how we connect and support the health and well-being of our fellow human beings around the globe. Enter Dr. Maryam Tafreshi, an international psychologist by training and focused on global physical and mental health. She's been leading several initiatives that support the very things I just referenced related to multicultural understanding, development of initiatives related to improved health, and well-being for those around the globe. I am really looking forward to learning more about her work and its impact over the years. So we're going to get right to it with Dr. Maryam Tafreshi. Dr. Maryam Tafreshi, thank you so much for joining us today here on Saybrook Insights. Before we get started, we had the pleasure, by the way, for our audience, I had the pleasure of first meeting Maryam on a unique call that we had about 6 months ago, and it was just such a joy to hear her engage. And I was like, this is one of our newest faculty members who've dove in right away into our community. And I was really excited to get to know you. So as we get started here today, tell us about yourself, your personal history relating to your academic and personal journey, how you got to Saybrook.
Thank you so much, Dr. Long, first for your kind welcome and also inviting me today to talk with you as a new faculty at Saybrook. So I am from Iran. I'm Iranian American, born in Iran. Then we immigrated to the U.S. for, I think I was like in kindergarten till middle of third grade. Revolution happened. A lot of people came out. We went back third grade, and after a few months, the war started. I was there, the war between Iran and Iraq. I was there for 8.5 years. It was great to be around family and the culture. The culture is very warm and just a lot of dancing and being together and cooking, and it's a collectivist culture. So all of that was fantastic, but definitely the war was not easy. I wanted to always come back for higher education. So after I finished my university, which I studied microbiology. 2 days after, I came to the US to pursue my Ph.D. I got accepted in San Diego for a master's program in molecular biology. Met my husband. He was working then in Chile. He moved from US-based company to Chile. So I moved with him. We then moved to Brazil. We came back to the US. We moved to Singapore, China, Singapore, US, Dubai, US. And then we changed states. So now I'm here. And we're here in Florida.
We're in the process of moving right now, and I thought that was stressful. Oh my gosh. I mean, like that's all the long plane rides to boot. I mean, that's really impressive. Good for you. So I assume we'll get into this in a little bit. This probably opened up your interest into international work that you're so into now, probably, or expanded it anyway.
Definitely. So a lot of people go and study international psychology to understand the world, as it is before even traveling much. For me, I lived international psychology, but I wanted to understand the science behind it for myself as a person who moved globally, and understanding others of how it is. So once I was, I had to delay my studies. We had 3 kids. My husband was traveling so much. We were away from family. Once I was in China, I was kind of losing my identity of who I am, because I always wanted to pursue my education and work. So I started to think of what I wanted to do. So before, I wanted to be in the field of either medicine or, as I said, pursue in molecular biology or genetics. I started to work in a lab and just being with the microscopes and the tubes, and that just didn't work well for me. I knew I had to be around people. So I decided to rethink of what I want to do. Another passion I had was psychology, and philosophy. So I remember when I was in university and high school, one of my hobbies was, when nobody was home, I would put paper on walls and I would write words and connect them and try to understand concepts in life. So I didn't know I was doing what international psychology does. I was doing what a transcendental phenomenological researcher does while I wasn't still there. Then 2 months, I said, okay, what should I do? I remember my father said, don't do psychology. Usually clinicians, they're counselors, they're with other people who have difficulty in life. It's going to affect them. So I thought, okay, I'm going to listen to that, not do that. Then I started to think, I said, let me really see, what do I want to do? It took me 2 months. I started to write on papers, going back and forth, try to write down anything that sounded unreachable, maybe socially not acceptable, or whatever it was. I said, I'm just going to write it down. And then when I narrowed it down, it was something related to psychology. But I wanted to work with human strength. I wanted to affect not just one person at a time, a wider range. I wanted to attend to global issues. So as I was searching, I didn't know such a psychology field related to these things existed. I tried to search, and all of a sudden I find the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, which is another TCS system like Saybrook. I find international psychology. Everything that it promised to teach, it was everything that I wanted to learn. So I started my master's. I truly enjoyed it, finished with a GPA 4.0. Then it was like, I'm not done. I'm just not done. I want to know. So I'm a passionate learner, but it was the education was so great. Especially one of the first things that started was about the cycle of socialization. How as children we're born, parents teach us, and the school and the community and the society and culture what to be, what is okay, what is not okay, and shapes us. And while culture is important for our survival, but also it can create some dysfunctional norms that can affect us as human beings. And then if we play that inside the cycle, we can create a trauma, generational trauma. So in international psychology, they were teaching us to become cycle breakers. So this was like, okay, this is what I want. I want to understand human strength. I want to understand multicultural competency, diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, global issues. So once I pursued my Ph.D., it truly helped me understand to the level I wanted. Once I started my research, it was concentrated on empowerment with a connection to mental and physical health, because as the theory of empowerment show, we cannot study empowerment disconnected from mental and physical health and satisfaction in life, because there's a bidirectional effect. So I became interested as an international psychologist to attend to global issues such as mental and physical health, empowerment, global peace, human rights, and DEI and multicultural competence.
Wow, what a rich educational experience you brought forward, and how you found your way there. How did you end up coming to Saybrook University then at the end of the day?
It was because of two reasons. One, leadership. It was the leadership, and it was the Saybrook that was leading the way in terms of global health, justice, and social change, and creativity and finding solutions to address global issues. And we have different departments that teach all of this. So the first time was, I believe it was Dean Moss that was invited by our dean at TCSPP at I believe it was an interdisciplinary conference. He presented there. I knew the topic of his presentation. It was about integrative health. I had to go and join. I just went to that conference to listen to Dean Moss. I was just amazed of the talk and the conversation that he held and what Saybrook does. And I started communicating, there's a chat box on Zoom, that I really wanted to connect with Dean Moss. Immediately, the staff that were supporting him got in touch with me, gave me his information. Once I wrote to Dean Moss, within a day, I got an email back. So a lot of times, once the levels go higher and you're a student, sometimes you don't hear from the deans maybe, or the presidents. It's just, they're not reachable. So I was so amazed, every time there was something, because I was really active since 2017 for global mental and physical health. As international psychology, we work as a bridge to bring diverse experts from multiple disciplines together to solve an issue. So we have that eye. When we see an issue, we can kind of know what are the disciplines can come together to solve that issue when those people cannot see it. So that was one thing that I was doing, that then I provided an opportunity for Dean Moss to present at MEPA, and then at the Integrative Mental Health Summit last year. Again, this year he's going to present in October. So the leadership was amazing, the presence of leaders. And then I saw that one time I said, let me see, with what Saybrook is offering, that it's exactly what I want. And the leadership, I wanted to work with leaders that want to bring change. That's where international psychologists should work. We can't have our wings closed. We have to be able to fly. So Saybrook provided that opportunity. I applied, and actually now I'm in the mind-body medicine department. My dean is Dean Moss. So I'm very happy about that. I have a fantastic department chair, and my colleagues are all fantastic. Then I had a chance to meet you. You guys all are, it's a truly humanistic, I have to say, university. You guys are available. You guys have a heart. You guys are a change maker. Saybrook is home.
Oh, wow. Well, that wasn't asking for the great plug, but Maryam, wow, that was just really inspiring and beautiful. Thank you for that. And I would agree with you in terms of the leadership we have. You mentioned Dean Moss, Dr. Donald Moss, for those who don't know him. He's one of our internationally renowned faculty. So for those who are getting to know Saybrook, he has really become a force to be reckoned with in the world of mind-body medicine, integrative health, and an inspiring person, just a great human being. And what you're telling me, that story about him getting back in touch with you within a day, is not surprising. He's been fully committed, and the guy still finds time to write 5 or 6 books a year, journal articles. He goes out and volunteers at hospitals and healthcare systems. Yeah, so really appreciate that, and you're in great leadership hands. And we're lucky to have you. We are lucky to have someone like yourself who's joined us to bring your expertise to the table. Before we get into because I want to dig a little deeper in the international psychology realm. As you know, I'm not a psychologist, so what I love about this is I'm a sponge. I get to hear about all the wonderful different variations of psychology. But I want to go back to something you mentioned. You grew up in Iran, and you were there during the Iran-Iraq War. And, I know some of these memories and all that can be painful, so please only share what you feel comfortable sharing. But what was it like to grow up in that period in Iran? And as you kind of think and reflect back on your experiences growing up, what do you think people should know that they don't know about the Iranian people in the country itself?
So it's a very old culture. It has very deep roots in history and civilization. The contributions that Persia has done, to the world is immense in terms of science, knowledge, arts, poetry, Maulana Rumi, Sa'di, Hafiz, and also the biggest one is the human rights that Cyrus the Great, 2,600 years ago, wrote down the first charter of human rights on a cylinder, which is above over here. That's a model of it. The real one is kept in a museum in England. So these were important contributions. For example, the human rights. Cyrus not only brought it for the Persian people, he expanded it. He brought it for others. And his name is in many religious books. So a lot of people know him, whether they have religion or they don't, they know him for what he has done. So I can say Iranian people, Persian people have great compassionate heart. During World War I and II, we didn't engage in war. We were kind of hosting people coming and taking care. So we love foreigners. These are the things that are not talked about. We love foreigners that come. We love Americans, actually. If there are so many Americans that have gone there for some reason and people go out of their way, they try to talk a little bit. If they're going to work and they see a foreigner, they try to help. They're very hospitable. And we love food, we love dancing, and I hope the world becomes in a way that, again, we can all get closer to each other, and that's something I hope it happens.
That's wonderful. I appreciate that. And there's so many great books. I've been reading a little bit more on the history of Iran and Persia, and I found it to be immensely useful. I would encourage others, as Dr. Tafreshi has noted, it's an ancient, long, in-the-tooth culture with so much that has contributed to our world and to our understanding scientifically and otherwise. So I really appreciate you bringing that forward. So you have this passion around international psychology. You spoke to, some elements behind it. Let's first get into, it feels like 100 divisions of APA. So for those who don't know, American Psychological Association has several different arms, and the one is the professional divisions that embody it. Division 32 is our humanistic division. I can't remember the division number for international psychology, but you have one.
It's Division 52. Yes, Division 52.
And so when we look at international psychology, what does that all entail exactly? Why did it become its own sort of sub area for investigation and research and practice?
There were a few different reasons. One was American Psychology Association saw that it's not enough just to take care of people going to counseling, because sometimes it's not the problem of the people. It's a problem that is coming from outside. The policies, the politics, the social norms. So they wanted to train psychologists, instead of working in the office, they work outside the office. They know how to read policy, change policy, correct it, develop it in order to maximize the health of people or minimize harm to them. So that is what we're trained for. We're trained to, if we're going to solve a global issue, at any level, at a local level or international level. We have to look at the history, the context, economy, resources they have, and try to solve it from a multi-level, multi-factor, and multidisciplinary way. While we pay attention and respect the culture, the ethics, the laws that are there, so we don't impose our views or cultural views or values on them. The other thing was also that psychology, they felt that psychology, the research is mainly focused on Western values, and they thought that this is not correct. So as international psychologists, for our dissertation, we're not allowed to actually conduct our research inside US. We have to conduct that outside. So we have students conducting, they have gone to Ghana, Philippines, Brazil. I conducted my research in Iran. It was a research about perspectives of Iranian women on empowerment, a phenomenological study on attitudes and policies.
That's incredible. So you're basically, if I can, I don't want to be too reductionist in this, but as someone who is an educational sociologist, so it has a very strong sociological component to it, a social psychological component, recognizing the importance of bringing in all of those pieces, education, religion, government policy, and how that feeds and supports, the mental health and well-being of the people in each country or region. Is that a fair summary, or what did I miss on that?
That's correct. That's correct. Actually, in my literature review on my chapter 2, there are a lot of articles that I used that had a sociological base. And it was interesting that one of the participants I was talking to had that background as well. So for example, as an Iranian that I wanted to go back, I had to go through a process called epoche, which I did it for 2 years, and I took it to the far end to make sure I'm doing it correctly. And what it is, I had to do self-reflection to be as bias-free as possible. Kind of process, what does empowerment mean to me as an Iranian woman? So I can put that on the side because I was going to go there to be at the service of people to hear their stories, not to impose my stories. If my life and living in different places has affected me, I didn't want that to influence them or how I hear their story. I also got a counselor because other than self-reflection, another thing that helps with bias is having the other reflection. And through that, I try to really deepen the approach towards this, and also using what Rumi says, breaking yourself like a vase and re-putting together all those parts to create yourself. Unlearning everything you learned so you can understand the reality in a very new way. So we never become fully bias-free, but we try to become as bias-free as possible.
To your point, it's always a work in progress, but that's always the objective or goal. I was just mentioning in the introduction, in 2016, we had taken it was a Education Beyond Borders trip to Berlin, Germany, and experienced education in context in relation to the refugees from Syria who were pouring into various countries at the time during the Syrian crisis that was going on. It's still going on to some degree, off and on, I think, as I understand it still. One of the things that emerged for me in this was how woefully ignorant I was, and I think we all recognize how ignorant we were in relation to the actual things that were happening to people and around people, especially the refugees who were making their way from Syria. And it opened up some doors for me in terms of my own mind, saying I've got to do better. I thought I knew. You can read a newspaper. I read The Economist. I feel like I'm globally minded. I get around. But you brought up some very important things around the nuances and the importance around that. And it sounds like this is so transformational, especially international psychologists working with these countries. Can you speak about how this international psychological approach opens minds, opens doors, and some of the maybe examples that you've seen that really stand out to you as being potent or powerful?
So for example, there's an article that one of our deans with some of our students wrote down, and it's about the identity change, process of identity change of international psychologists. So we really go through that process. Not all of us go, the extent that we go through it, it's not similar because it's like, how much work do you want to put in? People can go and study and pass. People can go study and get A's and come out. But how much do you reflect? How much do you critically think? And I think that makes a big difference of how you become later. Do you live in terms of the values of international psychology, or do you just know, international psychology and what it is, and we can write about it and talk about it? I try to take myself into that process. What it does, or how you ask how people can do it. Is that correct? How people can go through the process?
Really more like, can you speak to the process of how these experiences open minds and open doors for people, in terms of when they're exposed to different cultures and different experiences, and then maybe some examples if you have those.
It's very important to come in contact. If people have not come in contact with different groups, and it doesn't mean diversity is one thing. For example, now a lot of universities, a lot of schools, a lot of companies, they have diverse people. But are diverse people sitting and eating together? Are they talking together? Are they even doing something outside together, asking about each other's lives, curious and interested about each other's culture? We don't have to agree about everything. We don't have to necessarily like to adopt everything. But having that sense of curiosity to get close to somebody who is very different from us and try to know them from their point of view. Not the point of view of the media, not the point of view of the politicians, because they try to kind of bring disconnection between us and create fear. And I think we have enough of that they have created. If as people we can come together and have that curiosity and ask, there's so much pleasure in knowing somebody from a different culture, how they do what they do, and just enjoying each other.
Have you seen that firsthand for yourself? What examples would you give that were just stand out to you?
For example, when we were in China, we had, any country that actually we lived, there were expatriates from different countries. All of a sudden, I would know people from, let's say, at least 15 different countries, at least. So at our gatherings, for example, there are people talking, they turn this side, talk German, they turned and talk Chinese, and that, they knew at least 2 to 5 different languages. So one of the things they would say, I used to do Taekwondo. I started Taekwondo. I'm a 3rd Dan black belt, and I was an assistant coach. So I had very close relationship with the locals inside Singapore and China, and I had very close relationship with some Koreans. The door was open. While many of my friends said Asians usually don't open up. They keep themselves to themselves. That wasn't true. It was that curiosity. For example, when I did Taekwondo, it wasn't just about the martial art, it was about the values. So I was interested, I would go read books, and I would go and ask the Korean friends about it. And sometimes they were like, oh, I don't know that. So they would go and try to read about it. So I would respect their culture in terms of, let's say, hello, you enter, you bow. Now, if you're in Iran, you're a Muslim, you don't bow to anybody, but I would do that. But then later, we Persians, we hug. At the end, they knew me, so I would bow to them. And then at the end, I would say, okay, now I'm going to say goodbye in a Persian style. It became enjoyable. For example, one of my Korean friends said this. So I was enjoying them. They would share their food. They would share their tea. I would take my Persian food with Persian saffron for them. And one of my friends said this, Maryam, in our culture, we don't hug that much. The first time you came and hugged me, I was kind of shocked. But then I was always looking forward for you to come and hug me. Let me tell you something. Because of you, now I hug my kids often. I hug my parents, which we never did. And this is not the first time one of my Asian friends have told me. So we learned that greatness of joy from each other's culture, and that is wonderful. That's just joyful.
That's beautiful. Well, thank you for sharing that. That is quite lovely. I will say, when I was a young boy, I guess, I traveled with an orchestra for a while, and I stayed with a family in Germany. And over the course of a couple weeks, I became very close with the daughter and her boyfriend. And it turned out they ended up driving on their motorcycle all over Europe, traveling again with the orchestra, and we became really fast friends with each other. And I still reflect on that period today. They taught me so much about German culture that I was harboring all these weird stereotypes from just growing up here in the States, and kind of bashing those to the side and coming up with new understandings and realizations. So I think to your point, it's that contact, but it's also that immersion with and stepping forward and working to get to know. I just think that's so beautiful. So thank you for sharing that. As an international psychologist, Dr. Tafreshi, we got to talk about mental health a little bit here. And you are really into discussing and looking at empowerment, women's empowerment. I know also generally looking at health and well-being. So, and we've also been talking in America about this big mental health crisis we have here, which is real. But globally, maybe you could talk broadly about what is the state of mental health. And I know it's global. So, but maybe you have some ideas or could share with us, what are some of the trends right now that you've been seeing or that your field in the field of psychology has been seeing over the last 3 years?
So in 2018, there was at the Middle Eastern Psychological Association, I decided to organize, sponsor, and lead a multidisciplinary panel under the name of a global movement towards mental and physical health. And the reason was that there is a rise, United Nations Sustainable Developmental Goal has said that there's a rise on global illness. And it's going to just go up until like 2030 for, I don't remember exactly how many $trillion. So the form of disease have changed from contagious disease mainly to autoimmunity, heart problems. Depression and anxiety are 1/3 of the chronic illnesses, mainly are mental illnesses. And depression and anxiety are the two highest ones. Why should it be like this?
I'm sorry to interrupt. This is
at a global, yes. And why is this with all the science, with all the research, with all the technology, with all the pharmaceutical that we have, why are we not able to control chronic illness and it's just going on the rise? The amount of autoimmunity that is, happening right now to people. So this was the reason I invited Dr. Mensah from Mensah Medical and Mensah Research Institute, who is a co-founder of Integrative Mental Health, that Dean Moss also knows. So I won an award from the Chicago School of Professional Psychology, Monetary Reward Award, and I invited him, and I invited another MD, orthomolecular medical doctor from Germany, and then also the head immunologist of Dubai Hospital. And we all talked about the different ways that we can prevent illness or reverse illness. When a person is ill, let's say if it's mental illness, it's not that the medication of the brain has lessened. There's something going on either in the body and the immune system or in the brain that is happening, or even in the gut microbiome. This is why my microbiology was very handy. It was a good thing that I didn't study actually psychology because it made me be open to different ways other than counseling. Yes, sometimes counseling helps for mental illness, but other times we have to see, is it the blood sugar of the person going up and down during the time? Does this person have insulin resistance or hypoglycemia without having diabetes? A lot of us, our blood sugar goes up and down, and that can create depression, that can create anxiety, and it can create inflammation. Inflammation can be created due to food allergies, food sensitivities, which is different than food allergies, toxins, stress. And that inflammation can then create maybe for somebody that can have depression. For example, it has been, I know a person, every time he took high doses of quercetin, which is an anti-inflammatory, it's a nutrient that comes from apples. All of a sudden, the depression after 20 minutes would go away. That's a sign of inflammation. So how many times can that person get counseling? It's not going to affect. So there are many different reasons. Sometimes it's the gut microbiome. The diversity of the gut microbiome, and specific in the US, is very low. They have, research has shown. What is the reason? Because we don't use produce that much. We don't use produce. We eat a lot of processed food. So the diversity is not that much. So now clinicians, let's say like Dr. Datis Karazian, who's a fellow researcher at Harvard, he's a leading researcher and clinician, and really trying to educate the public, educate clinicians on how to reverse illnesses. It was with his help that I'm going to say now, I have autoimmunity myself. With his help that my autoimmunity is under remission. With his help that 2 of our boys who had asthma, they don't have it. With his help that one of our boys 4 years in a row would get so sick. And why was that? Because let's say on the chart, The blood test, for example, that you do a blood test and your white blood cells are in a normal range. So the doctor says, you're okay. But if the white blood cells are not in the functional range, that person can get very sick. And that was exactly what was happening to our son. So the doctors wouldn't do anything until our son would get hospitalized. Once Dr. Karazian, for example, saw that, said, no, we need to bring your T killer cells and B cells up, because this was like a chronic illness. We need to bring it up. And he gives very high doses of vitamins, minerals, herbs. Never again our son got sick.
Interesting.
Yes, so what Saybrook is doing is similar with the integrative approach, complementary approach to health. Saybrook is bringing many different ways that maybe, no, the medicine cannot help. There are other ways, or together a complementary way that we can help the mind and the body to heal, which will be more cost effective and specific if insurance helps us.
Yeah, no, that's a really good set of points you raise. And I think you've captured that as well as any guest I've had on here in terms of the relationship between the mind and body. And sometimes it isn't necessarily counseling regimen that needs to happen. I was speaking with a gentleman of Indian descent. He's currently a permanent resident here in the United States. And he was saying our focus on counseling, it almost mirrored exactly what you were saying. He's like, it's not to say that we shouldn't have counseling, but there are so many other factors, and that globally in each country and each region, there are different approaches, these alternative approaches, these complementary approaches that should also be considered, because the mind may not be the first area that we need to be paying close attention to, but we should be paying attention to the gut biome and to our other health factors that are feeding into that. It's a really great way that you put it. I appreciate that.
Thank you.
Absolutely. So you mentioned this really interesting term, and I read about it because I read up on you, of course, beforehand. And I want to know a little bit. We're kind of running low on time here, but for a couple minutes, maybe, what is orthomolecular, and how does it tie into integrative medicine and psychology? You mentioned it just a minute ago.
It's about nutrients, not nutrition. It's about nutrients. For example, the vitamins and minerals that might be critical for the body. For example, the level, both Dr. Mensah and Dr. Fredrickson, who joined me at Middle Eastern Psychology Association, mentioned, plus Dr. Karazian and many other, leading complementary, integrative, or functional medical doctors that are leading the way. We are very low, many of us, in vitamin D level, zinc, B6. So what they do, for example, at Mensa Medical, they will come and check the blood of the person and also get samples of the hair and try to see what are the minerals and vitamins that are low. What is the methylation of the person? Because that's another important factor. Or the pyrrole status of the person. They bring all this information, they talk with the patient, and knowing the background and maybe what are the symptoms they have that they talk about. Once the blood work comes, the test of the hair comes, then they know exactly what is too low or too high. For example, one of the things he talks about, high copper. When somebody has very high copper, they're very low in zinc. And high copper in women, what it can do, it can create breast cancer, ovary cancer. So one of the things that they do at Mensa Medical, they try to flush out the copper that the body of that woman who's estrogen dominant cannot flush it out through zinc therapy.
Interesting.
Through medicinal dose of zinc. And also the women who have high doses of copper, what happens, their mood starts to change. And then once they do the zinc therapy, all of a sudden the person they're not trapped in their body because of the high doses of copper. High doses of copper actually are shown to be in men who are very aggressive and in jail.
Oh, wow. Really?
Yes. So sometimes, yes, it's counseling. Sometimes it's the injustices that has happened in the systems around the world or in a country. But sometimes it's these imbalances. And once those are balanced, the person can find themselves, get access to themselves.
I think I say this, our producer Phil would say, Nathan, you say this all the time. We need like an hour and a half to talk, and I'd love to have you back on to talk a bit more about the details around the therapy, because it sounds like these are clinically proven, or there have been evidence-based trials around this, and it's exciting to hear a lot of this, new work and maybe not so new work that's being done to advance healthcare. So appreciate you bringing this to light. This is the first time we've really talked about orthomolecular, treatments, and I think that's exciting. I want to shift us because we're coming to the tail end, but I want to make sure I get this last question in before our final two quick take questions. We're under no illusion right now that, things are really tense and growing even tenser around the world and internally in the United States. And it seems like more populations seem to embrace authoritarian regimes or embracing more warlike stances and footing. How do we advance cultural understanding? It's something that's core to who you are. And you've alluded to some of this in your earlier discussion. How do we advance greater cultural understanding right now, especially and to maybe bring those tensions down and to improve how we connect with each other?
For example, one of the things is, as we talked, is about not having fear to have the cultural contact. People are fearful that if they have people of other cultures in their country, let's say, or come in contact, I'm going to lose my identity. I'm going to lose my culture. No, you're not going to lose anything. For example, if me and you are talking, if we exchange about our cultures, our values, you're not going to become me. I'm not going to become you. Our world just expands. There's a term called enlightened globalization we use in international psychology. What does that mean? Every culture, yes, it's created for the survival of the human being. But as we said, there are some dysfunctional social norms. Let's say when something in my culture is not working, I come and look at other cultures, even yourself, and I see, how do they do it? And I kind of reflect on it. Would that work in my culture? Can I switch it? So through knowing each other, we kind of enrich and we can improve our own culture. We don't have to become each other. We can kind of switch and tailor and change things just to become better so we don't have the generational traumas going on. We can fix those. We can become cycle breakers. But that's through knowing each other. Through knowing each other, we have more tools to become healthier in our lives.
Wise words from Dr. Tafreshi. She's going to give us more wise words here on our quick take, which is now the popular thing on our show. We've even got a couple sizzle reels. You're going to be featured in a future one. So the first quick take is, what does the term humanistic mean to you?
I read this, and every time I read it, the first thing that comes is having a big heart. Humanistic means having a big heart. And in order to have that is somebody who has self-reflection and continues to self-reflect. Somebody who has other reflection. Somebody who tries to find the biases, what works, what doesn't work, to maximize the health, minimize harm. Through that, then we can understand each other also. So having that big heart to have compassion for others, but never forget ourselves. Because some of us, we kind of give that compassion to others, we forget. I think that's not it. It's a big heart that can be inclusive of all.
That's wonderful. And the last one for us, so with everything going on in the world right now, with everything, the health issues, mental health crises, what are 3 things people can do right now to make their lives better?
One, there's a lot of trauma, again, going on in the world. If they can find, and they have the insurance, they can find trauma specialists through CBT, through EMDR, they can take the tension out and they can relearn how to be supported to be a cycle breaker, to learn to be assertive and to learn to live a healthy life, to have the culture that they have and correct the things that doesn't work. That's one thing. The other one is vitamin D. Check your vitamin D twice a year, because if your vitamin D is around 65 to 85 blood level, what it does, it can lift depression for many people, prevent cancer, prevent autoimmunity, or if somebody has autoimmunity, they won't get the second or third one. And also muscle growth for many of the people who do weights, because it raises the testosterone. So that's one thing. I do that, and my kids do that also. We make sure and also not getting viruses. It helps not to get viruses, including now, with COVID. The other one is, you talked about dictatorship. Dr. Muqaddam, he's an Iranian English psychologist, very well known in the United Nations. He said, The dictator, his research is about dictatorship. The dictator of the dictator will always, win. And that's where we are kind of heading. I was thinking, why does this happen? Don't many of us teach compassion and values and character to our kids? What is it that we're not doing that the dictator of the dictator is rising? The answer came to me that through the work of a great Canadian psychologist, Dr. Jordan Peterson, it came to me that while we're training compassionate people, we're not training compassionate, assertive, compassionate, courageous people. We are training compassionate dormants, compassionate, naive, compassionate, scared people. As what I do as a mom, we have 3 boys. I tell them, yes, I'm the authority. You have the right to be assertive. Come and tell me if there's something I'm doing wrong. So while I said, say it respectfully, keep your compassion, but I want my son to be assertive. I think only through keeping our great heart, we don't have revenge. We don't want to do those bad things. And keeping that compassion for ourselves and others, but being assertive, standing tall, maybe the compassionate people can get to the top. I'm hoping maybe that's the answer.
All right. Well said. And thank you so much for your time today. Dr. Maryam Tafreshi, faculty member at Saybrook University, international psychologist. Where can we find you on the web, Dr. Tafreshi?
I think my information, my bio is on Saybrook website. I have a LinkedIn, professional LinkedIn. I do have a professional Instagram. I made it private because I told myself this is not a one-on-one psychology. So the same way I'm putting my time, people who really want me, there are so many people out there, they have to have the respect to be in my class inside Instagram. And also I have a Facebook. I think it's a global movement for mental and physical health that I recently opened.
Very good. So you can find her online at Saybrook University. It's Maryam Nasir, or Maryam N, as in Nasir Tafreshi, because there is another individual with your name out there as well.
Yes.
You can find Maryam, who will take you and help you and support you if you find her in terms of whatever you're looking to do in international psychology and integrative health. Just wonderful interview today. Thank you, Dr. Tafreshi. Appreciate it so much.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Maryam, thank you again for that wonderful interview. I hope you enjoyed Dr. Tafreshi as much as I did. Remember our 3 major takeaways. Find a specialist, a trauma specialist, a psychologist, a counselor to help break the cycle. Really lean into finding ways to improve and enhance your mental health. Get vitamin D. That's the number 2 item on her list. Check it out. Make sure your levels are good and lift it up if they're low. And lastly, lean into being compassionate and courageous, and that ideally will help lift us all up as a society and as a civilization. If you want to see the video segments we've created, our fabulous Phil, the producer, visit our Saybrook YouTube page. He also does our audio casts, and it's all super fabulous. And if you'd like to support the podcast, go to Apple iTunes, leave that 5-star rating and review, and subscribe so you can get episodes as they come out. If you're on Spotify, leave that 5-star rating and make sure to follow us. You can, of course, subscribe to us on most major podcast platforms, including Google Podcasts, Stitcher, Pandora, and others. Remember to check our show notes for information on today's guest, including links to her website, social media, and the like. And for more about our mind-body medicine program or psychology program, simply go to www.saybrook.edu. Click on areas of study at the top of the page and pick one of them. You're going to find a great deal of information on mind-body medicine or psychology. Simply Google Saybrook University if you just want the simple way, and it's really easy. Click on mind-body medicine or psychology program as they come up. All right, that's it for today. Take care and be well, everybody.